So I've been playing around a lot with Scourge this weekend, like so many other Necros have been doing. And I've been very disappointed so far with Scourge. Um, I've touched a bit in my past videos from like the beta weekend and stuff about my reservations with how Scourge works. But I've kind of been holding off hope that there'll be changes or maybe the meta will shift in a way that's a little more favorable to it. And at this point it doesn't look like that's going to happen, so I've been... Yeah, I don't really know of a good way to put this, but basically, I don't like it. I will probably go back to playing Reaper. That isn't to say Scourge is bad, but it's just, it wasn't what I was hoping for this class. So basically, Scourge is Condi Reaper taking to the most logical extreme, is basically what Scourge is. So, Scourge does, as most of you have probably already noticed, is a massive amount of burst condi DPS, regardless of whether you're running curses or blood magic or whatever trait line. Like, if you have Soul Reaping with Doomfire and you have Scourge on, you will do a massive amount of condi DPS. At the same time, you pay for this with having almost no sustain, and like, you can't make a heavy sustain Scourge. Like, I've tried. Like, at best case, you put on like a Minder's Amulet and Blood Magic, and you can get okay-ish sustain with like no DPS. And if you're running any kind of a build with like an actual punch to it, like, you have no sustain. Like, you just can't do high sustain Scourge. You basically... I mean... It basically works like a staff ellie, like you either nuke everyone out of existence or you die in the first 10 seconds of the engagement. That's basically how Scourge works. And that's kind of what disappoints me, is because we already had this gameplay to some extent with Condi Reaper. Like, Condi Reaper was really good at killing people, but it could not sustain itself. And Scourge is just that taken to the logical extreme. It has even more Condi burst than Condi Reaper ever had, with even less sustain. In fact, I would say Scourge is probably the lowest sustain elite spec of any of them, including the Heart of Thorns ones and all of the Path of Fire ones. Like, there is no lower sustain elite spec than Scourge, period. They don't exist. And another thing that's kind of disappointed me too is that because they've gone with this really low sustain version of Necromancer, like even by Necromancer standard, Scourge is low sustain, which is kind of sad. It kind of pushes you even harder into the you need support to function with Scourge than you were already pushed into. Like, if you were playing a Condi Reaper before Path of Fire, you probably wanted to have a support Tempest if you wanted to be really effective. Now, you could kind of get away with it if you didn't, but again, you really needed to have that if you wanted to be truly effective. Power Necro could kind of fudge it, which is one of the reasons I enjoyed Power Necro so much, was because, again, it wasn't nearly as dependent on Tempest as Condi Reaper was. And Scourge? Like, it's even more dependent on Tempest, but at the same time, it scales even better with a Tempest than regular Reaper did. So, we've basically had this meta for the past year of if you play a Necro, you have to be with a Tempest all the time. And with Scourge, it's just the same exact thing, just taken to a bigger extreme. Because you don't have the self-sustain, and at the same time you also do synergize really well with support Tempests, because you provide AoE cleansing on your F2, which can help the Tempest, and then you provide barriers on your heal skill and your F3, which also help the Tempest. So you keep the Tempest alive longer, and he keeps you alive longer. So it's an even better duo than Tempest plus Condi Reaper was. Which means you will probably see Scourge in like every singles fives tournament team. But other than that, you won't really see Scourge doing well in solo queue. Now, obviously, there are a ton of Scourges in solo queue right now, and it does do a massive amount of DPS. But I think going forward, people are going to just stop dropping Scourge as the novelty wears off, and as people get more accustomed to dealing with the Scourge. Because there is a telegraph, like, there's a time delay between you hitting a skill and the damage occurring. It's not like this instant Condi Bomb, and of course there's the actual drop of this, so once you become familiar with how Scourge works and you get some practice in fighting them, they become very easy to shut down, and I think that's something we'll start to see happen more. Also, as people start to realize that Scourge is really, really glassy, we'll definitely see a Tunnel to Scourge meta come out of it. And it's kind of going to make solo queuing on a Scourge basically unplayable going forward, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe, probably not this season, but if next season, so season 9, if we end up with, like, if you go into ranked with a Scourge, people will probably be asking you to swap to something else. That's basically my expectation for Scourge going forward. And this is particularly true if people on the forums that have been whining about OMG Condi Bomb get their way and get Scourge's damage nerfed, because then it'll just be like, why even play this spec? Like, seriously, this is the biggest DPS bomb in the meta right now, on the glassiest spec in the meta right now. That's what Scourge is, and it kind of ticks me off, because I wasn't hoping for that. I was hoping for a brawler. I was hoping for something tanky, or a support. I would love to play support Necro, and they told us that Scourge would be support, but nope, you can't do it. I tried. Like, it's just, you don't really bring anything to the table and you die too much. I kind of touched on this on my beta weekend commentary, but it's even worse now with the nerfs to shades that occurred. And the fact that your F2 costs a lot more than it used to isn't helping either. I would like to see changes, but realistically, I don't even see how they could change Scourge to fix its problems. Like, there's no real way you could make Scourge work as a support, unless you, like, ditched all of its offensive capabilities and completely reworked all of the F skills. Like, they're just not going to tweak it. Just by tweaking it, make it work, because it needs to have raw healing. Like, just barriers is not a good mechanic. Except in World v World. It works really well in World v World, because you can just stack a million Scourges and get infinite barriers, but in the rest of the game, you can't do that. So, yeah, this spec's basically, I would honestly call it just a World v World only spec. This was something that I kind of been worried about ever since I saw them first preview the shade mechanic, but I was hoping it was going to be wrong. Because basically the other thing, another problem that Scourge has, is because of the way these shades work, it doesn't really work well in SPVP, because in SPVP, like, you're moving fast, like, people are all over the place, and I've touched on this before, is that the way you play Scourge in SPVP is basically, say that Beetle over there is a player, you just run up, and you just spam all your burst buttons. You just drop the shade on their head, spam the burst buttons, and then once they move out of the shade or react, if they haven't died, you forget about that shade, because the shade's useless. Like, people aren't just going to stand in your shades. So, once... Which means you end up with this awkward mechanic of just trying to drop shades on people's heads and burst them down before they move out of the shade. You don't really use the shades in the way the devs were saying it was going to be used, where it'd be this super strategic thing where you'd, like, control the battlefield, I think was the phrasing they were using. Yeah, that doesn't happen outside of World War. It doesn't even work in PvE that well either. Because, like, while, yeah, most bosses aren't going to move out of your shades, at the same time, because most bosses are static like that, you're not really using the shades. It's just, I'm going to put this down on my target, do DPS buttons until the shade disappears, and then I'll drop another shade and press more DPS buttons. It's just, like, it works in PvE, but it's not really engaging. It's just...
You will obey.
I'd call it a square peg round hole. Like, World v World's the only place where the whole control of the battlefield thing with shades even works at all. In both PvE and SPVP, it's just a very clunky mechanic that I don't particularly enjoy using.
So, where should we start?
And now, granted, this is a preference thing. Like, I usually, like, any mechanic where you're dealing with a mechanic that's, like, outside of your character, like a pet or a shade or a whatever, just any external mechanic that's external from your character, I don't really like those. They always feel clunky to me. one of the reasons you pretty much never see me running any kind of minions on any build. I never even liked running Rise. I mean, obviously, way back when Rise was super OP, I still ran it, but I don't like any minion mechanics at all, and Shades are getting really close to that.
The compact is sworn.
Now, some people do like it, and I'm sure you'll see a lot of players putting in a ton of effort to try and get good at Scourge, and I'm sure there's some players that will do quite well with Scourge. It's not my particular cup of tea, and I don't really think it's a good solo queue spec. So I've kind of been disappointed since I basically have to cross my fingers and hope the next expansion brings something. I mean, hopefully they might be able to do something towards making support Scourge actually a reality. Because again, I would really love to see that, but right now it doesn't exist, so we're basically stuck with this. If you're a Scourge, you're just a condi bomb class. And it's just not something I find engaging, so I'll probably be playing Reaper for the foreseeable future. I'll still play around with it. Like, I'm not gonna ever, like, I play everything on Necromancer. I'm not going to completely abandon this elite spec, but I'll probably be going back to Reaper in the days to come. And I think a lot of Necros are. I know a lot of people have already expressed discontent with how Scourge works. But I think you'll be seeing a lot of the Reapers coming back once the whole novelty of new elite spec wears off. And that's basically the only thing I have to say about Scourge. Also, if you're wondering about grieving stats, I've seen a lot of, this is kind of unrelated to Scourge, but I've seen a lot of Necromancers asking about grieving stats in PvE. You get them from this guy. He's the guy that sells the stuff. I don't know exactly how to unlock this, but I'm sure the wiki will have it up in, you know, like a week from now. They'll probably figure out how to do this. I've been trying to figure that out all afternoon, and I haven't figured out exactly how to unlock these things. But here's your grieving stats, if you wanted to know where to get them. And then here's your armor pieces. Also, the skins are pretty good. I kind of want all of these skins because it looks so shiny. Like, is this not just an awesome skin? Shiny, very shiny. Yeah, I know that's a little bit off topic from what I was talking about, but there you go, so. And that's basically it for this video, so. I'll hopefully get some more concentrated gameplay videos up in the future. I know, I did the live stream on Friday. I didn't really get a lot of positive comments about that, and it didn't really work too well, so I probably won't be doing live streams again, and I'll probably be returning to my standard video content.